Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Welcome to our 20th lesson of our simplified Tajweed series, which is a series of Tajweed lessons introduced by Quran University uniquely designed Quran learning management system with the purpose of introducing Tajweed in a modern and easy approach. Through this series of lessons, you will be introduced to Tajweed rules using a unique, modern and innovative approach to teach Tajweed that utilizes the color codes of Mus'haf al-Tajweed as a common denominator that links those lessons to Tajweed rules. With such approach, we aim to make the understanding of Tajweed rules much easier and to practically help you to apply those rules while reading the Quran. Our topic for this lesson is Tafkheem and Tarqeeq for the letter Ra. In our Quran learning management system, whether we're using the desktop version or the mobile version, in both cases, we use the Ottoman script of Medina Mus'haf with Tajweed color codes, which we call قواعد ألوان التجويد or Tajweed color legend, where every Tajweed rule is given a unique color code. The objectives of these color codes is to alert us to Tajweed rules while reading the Quran. So, if we look at the colors used in Tajweed color legend, we'll find the color dark blue or navy blue. And if we look at this page of Quran and attempt to look for a letter that has this dark blue, we'll find the letter Ra in the word Ramadan. And the Ra of this letter would have the hukum of Tafkheem of the Ra. And that Tafkheem is the topic of this lesson, where also we're going to study the Tarqeeq for the Ra, which is practically not given any unique color, but the regular black color. In this lesson, we'll review what we have learned previously about the articulation and characteristics of the letter Ra. Then, we'll review what we have learned previously about the concept of Villarization, which is called Tafkheem in Tajweed terminology, and learn about the cases that needs to apply Tafkheem on the Ra. Then, we'll review what we have learned previously about the concept of Attenuation, Tarqeeq, in last lesson, and learn about the cases that needs to apply Tarqeeq on the letter Ra. Then we'll get to know the cases in which both Tafkheem and Tarqeeq are possible for the Ra. In an earlier lesson on articulation and characteristics of letters, we've talked about the Ra articulation, and we'll revise quickly what we have learned in that lesson. We said that the Ra is among the tip of the tongue letters. What do we mean by that? Well, we mean that the Ra is articulated between the tip of the tongue here and an area of the hard palate just behind the first premolars and the canine teeth. This area. Such approximation would lead to the Ra to be passing between them, producing the sound R. And if we look at the hard palate from an inferior view, we'll see a ridged area. That ridged area here is the area at which the tip of the tongue is raised from here to touch it to produce the letter Ra. And this black arrow shows how the tongue is raised to touch that area for producing the letter Ra. Now if we look at it from the side view, we'll see the tongue in red and its tip is raised to that ridge area to produce the letter Ra. Now, and after we have talked about the articulation of the Ra, we'll move to talk about the characteristics of the letter Ra. Remember that we said characteristics are classified into intrinsic basic ones and incidental conditional ones. And we said that the intrinsic ones are basically the characteristics that are always associated with the letter and that are part of the intrinsic makeup of that letter. In case of the Ra, there are 5 intrinsic characteristics with the opposite. The Ra is characterized of being loud, and in terms of looseness, it is considered to be intermediate, and it is depressed, open, and fluent. Those in red are characteristics of strength, while the ones colored in green are characteristics of weakness. And under the category of characters that has no opposites, we'll find that the Ra is characterized of being a trembling letter, where trembling means multiple brief, complete blockages in a row caused by a tongue to lead to a vibration in the sound of the Ra. If you see, has always trembling. So in fact, trembling is part of the intrinsic characteristics of the Ra. But exaggerating that trembling is not right. The second category of characteristics are those that are conditional, which are the characteristics that might be associated with the letter in certain occasions but not in others. And Tafkheem and Tarqeeq are example of conditional characteristics. The reason is that in certain conditions, meaning cases, the Tafkheem is the rule for the Ra, while in other cases or conditions, the Ra should be attenuated, it should have Tarqeeq. Yet in other conditions, there are cases where both Tarqeeq and Tafkheem can be applied for the Ra. Now, let's make a comparison between Villarization of the Ra and Attenuation, Tarqeeq of the Ra. We'll realize that Villarization or Tafkheem is an augmentation of the resonance of the Ra, filling the mouth with reverberation, echo, due to the elevation of the most posterior, this is the most posterior back of the tongue, to the velar area, raised here towards the velar area, for which we call the letter villarized, and for naming this process Villarization, because of pushing the back of the tongue to the velar area. This will lead to concavity of the middle of the tongue and narrowing of the throat area. This is a concavity of the middle of the tongue, and this is the throat being narrowed. If we look at attenuation now, we'll find that it is the exact opposite of Villarization, where there is an attenuation of the resonance of the Ra, leading to no echo being produced due to the depression of the most posterior part of the tongue. The most posterior part of the tongue, the back of the tongue, is depressed, is going down, rather than being elevated as it was in the Villarization. So it's going away from the velar area, leading to convexity. Notice the tongue here is flat or convex compared to being concave in Villarization, so leading to convexity of the middle of the tongue and widening of the throat. So this is the tongue being convex, and this is the throat. The back of the throat is not narrowed, it's actually wide. Let's now talk about the possibilities of the cases of Villarization and attenuation for the letter Ra. There are three possibilities. The first one is Tafkheem or Villarization, which could be caused by 8 possible cases. 3 of them are related to the Fatha, the Haraka, the movement Fatha, where another 3 cases are related to Dhamma, and 2 more cases related to Sukoon. So 3 for Fatha, 3 more for Dhamma makes 6, and 2 more for Sukoon gives us a total of 8 cases for Tafkheem. Now, Tarqeeq has 4 cases, and they are basically related to Kasra, 2 of them, and the other 2 are related to Sukoon as well. We're left now with a third possibility that has 2 cases within it, and in this possibility, either Tarqeeq or Tafkheem can be applied for those 2 cases, which are both related to Sukoon. We can easily understand the rules of Villarization and attenuation of the Ra with a simple concept kept in mind. The rule is based on the movement, the haraka of the Ra, and its neighbor letters. So it's not only the Ra, it could be the Ra, the letter before, the letter after, or the letter that follows the one after the Ra. And if we look into the cases where we have mentioned that Tafkheem is to be applied, we realize that the Tafkheem has always been related to Fatha, Harakat al-Fath, and Dhamma, Harakat al-Dhamm, and Tarqeeq is always related to the Kasra. So Kasra, always Tarqeeq, Fatha or Dhamma, always Tafkheem. Now the rest, what's left is basically related to Sukoon. So when Ra has Sukoon, it can be either villarized in these 2 cases, villarized, or attenuated in these 2 cases, or it can have both possible Tafkheem or Tarqeeq as in these 2 cases. And these cases will be clearly illustrated as we go through the examples. We'll start with the first example where the Ra has a Fatha itself, like here we'll see the word Ramadan and the Ra has a Fatha just above it, and let's listen.
شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن.
Ramadan, Ra, and not Ra. Then, if the Ra itself has a Dhamma, like we see here, the Dhamma over the Ra in Kafaru, let's listen.
إن الذين كفروا.
Kafaru, Ru, and not Ru. then it can be that the ra itself doesn't have the fatha, but the letter before it has a fatha. Like here, the ra has a sukoon, but the meme before the ra has a fatha.
وإني سميتها مريم.
Maryam, we don't say Maryam, we say Maryam. And same thing with the dhamma, where the ra itself doesn't have the dhamma, but the letter before it, the qaf here in Quran, has the dhamma.
القرآن لأنذركم به.
Qur'anu has a tafkheem. The next example is where the second letter before it, it's not the preceding letter like the qaf before the ra, but one more has a fatha, like this one.
والعصر.
Asr. Look at the ra. It's the letter before it, and then the letter before the one before it, which is the ayn, has a fatha. And so the letter itself has sukoon for pausing in it, preceded by a letter with sukoon, preceded by a letter with fatha. Let's listen.
والعصر.
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 The ra has a kasra, but it got sukoon for pausing in it because we paused, we stopped recitation on it because it's at the end of the verse, the end of the ayah. Then it got sukoon. So the sukoon is not natural. It's a transient. It's an acquired sukoon. Now before that sukoon, there's a letter with another sukoon, and then the letter with a fatha that pushes the ra to have tafkheem. Same thing applies for dhamma, khusr. Khusr here, we find that there is a dhamma not on the letter before the ra, but on the letter just before the ra. So in that case, we have a ra. Let's listen.
إن الإنسان لفي خسر.
This ra, although originally has a kasra, or tanween with kasr, it has got sukoon for the situation where we had to pause on it because it's at the end of the ayah. So it's an acquired sukoon. And then it was preceded with a letter with sukoon, which was preceded with a letter with dhamma. So in reality, sukoon has a weakness. So when there is a letter with a dhamma or a fatha before sukoon, it has the dominance. And the rule of that haraka, which is a fatha or a dhamma, applies on what's after it, whether it's one letter after it, as in this case, or two letters after it, as in this case. We'll move now to the tafkheem caused by sukoon. Taking an example, qirtas. We find that the ra here has sukoon, and the ra here, although preceded by a kasra, yet it has tafkheem, not tarqeeq, due to the letter that followed the ra. The letter following the ra is the ta, and since the ta is a tafkheem letter, it has its impact on the ra before it, pushing it towards tafkheem rather than tarqeeq caused by the kasra. Let's listen.
ولو نزلنا عليك كتابا في قرطاس.
قرطاس. We realize that the ra has tafkheem, and this is because of the ta, which is an elevation letter, making it a villarization letter, impacting its villarization, its tafkheem, on the ra before it. And the eighth case of tafkheem cases is sukoon preceded by a transient kasra, like this. Irji'u. Irji'u, the hamzatul wasl, the hamza here under the alif, is a transient hamza. And that kasra that it has is also a transient kasra. In that case, because of that, the ra that follows it should be having tafkheem. Let's listen.
ارجعوا إلى أبيكم
ارجعوا Tafkheem. So the Tafkheem here is because of a transient kasra caused by a transient hamza. Now let's move to the cases of Tarqeeq, and they are related mainly to kasra. And the first case, when the ra itself has a kasra, like this example, Kareem. We noticed that the ra itself has a kasra, and in that case, it has to be attenuated. It has to have tarqiq. Let's listen.
ورزق كريم
Kareem, not Kareem, Kareem. Next example, Hijr, the ha before the letter which precedes the ra has a kasra. Let's listen.
لذي حجر
In this case, we have stopped at the ra. So it got sukoon for pausing on it, and it is preceded by a still letter with sukoon, the jim in this case, which in turn is preceded by a letter with kasra, the ha. So this movement is more powerful, more dominant on the sukoon, so it pushes its impact on the ra, which is having sukoon itself by having a pause on it, because it's at the end of the ayah. And the final effect of the kasra is having the ra with tarqiq, hijr, hijr, barely hearing it. Now, it is required that the kasra of the preceding letter to be original and to be followed by attenuated letter. If the kasra is original but followed by villarized letter, it ends up, when there is a sukoon, to have villarization of the ra. While, on the other hand, if it has sukoon, similar to that, preceded by original kasra, but followed by attenuated letter, it will lead up to attenuation of the ra. Fir'aun, the fa here, is having a kasra, original kasra, and the ra itself has a sukoon, followed by ayn, which is an attenuated letter. So it leads up to attenuation of the ra with a sukoon. Let's listen.
وأغرقنا آل فرعون
Fir'aun. We didn't say Fir'aun, but we had the ra with attenuation. Fir'aun. And the reason for that is that the ayn is a depressed letter, which automatically makes it an attenuation letter, leading the ra with sukoon before it to become attenuated. And the last case of tarqiq al-ra is when you have an induced sukoon, a sukoon of the ra that is induced by pausing on the ra. Like in bil khayr here. The ra, as you see, has a tanween with kasr, but in this example, when we stop on it, when the reciter pause on it, it is transferred into a sukoon because of pausing on it. And if we see what's preceding it, we'll find that it's a ya sakina, khayr. And let's listen to the reciter pronouncing it.
ويدعو الإنسان بالشر دعاءه بالخير.
We notice that the ra has been attenuated. Now we're going to talk about the cases in which both villarization and attenuation are allowed. And we'll start with the first case, where we're going to take an example, Misr. In Misr, the ra, although it has a fatha, it will get sukoon, as we're going to see in the example, as we pause on it. So it's an acquired sukoon, not natural one, preceded by a letter which is villarized having sukoon. The sad is a villarized letter, and the letter before the preceding letter has a kasra. So the second letter before it has a kasra. This meme has a kasra.
وقال ادخلوا مصر
Misr, we realize that the ra is attenuated, but if the reciter decides to make it villarized, he has the choice to do that. Remember, the sad is an elevated villarized letter. Now for the second example, and in this case we're going to take an example, firq. The ra has sukoon, it's still, and it is preceded by a kasra, as we see here, the kasra under the fa, and is followed by a velarized letter with a kasra. The qaf is a velarized letter and it has a kasra. Now the example.
فكان كل فرق كالطود العظيم.
The qaf is an elevated velarized letter, pushing the ra to be velarized if needed, but the fa with the kasra can also push ra to be attenuated, and that's why in this situation both velarization and attenuation are possible. Now it's time for practice, where we're going to look at this page of Quran and search for words with the letter ra, extract the ra's, and identify those with Tafkheem and those with Tarqeeq, and apply those Tajweed rules while pronouncing them. But first, let's remember the color that is given in Mus'haf al-Tajweed for Tafkheem and Tarqeeq for the ra. Remember that Tafkheem is giving this dark navy blue, as in the word Ramadan, and the ra is giving the dark navy blue, while Tarqeeq is not given any special color, it's just put in black. Let's start finding the first example. The ra in Wal Fajr is actually given the dark blue color, indicating that it should have Tafkheem, Wal Fajr. And the reason is that although it has a kasra, yet it got sukoon for pausing in it, and it is preceded by a still letter. The jim has a sukoon, which in turn is preceded by a fatha. So the fatha dominates the sukoon, and the sukoon, which is caused by pausing, and the effect is Tafkheem. Second example, وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ. The ra in Ashr, same thing applies for it. It got sukoon for pausing on it, and it's preceded by a still letter, and it is in turn preceded by a fatha. So the fatha pushes the effect of Tafkheem on the ra here. Ashr. وَالشِّفْعِ وَالْوِتْرِ, same rule applies. And then وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَسْرٍ, same rule applies. So all of them ends up with Tafkheem of the ra. Now Hijr here, we'll find that Hijr does not have the dark blue color. Instead, it has the black color, indicating that it should have Tarqeeq. The reason that the letter preceding what's preceding it is having kasra. So it has sukoon for pausing on it. It's at the end of the verse. And then it's preceded by a second still letter, which in turn is preceded by the kasra. So the kasra here is what caused this to have Tarqeeq rather than Tafkheem. The last example is as-sakhra. جابوا الصخرة. The hukm of the ra here is Tafkheem because it has a fatha. جابوا الصخرة بالواد. So the fatha is having its direct effect on the ra, causing it to have Tafkheem. And as usual, we'll summarize the whole lesson in one slide. In this lesson, we revised the articulation of the ra, and then we revised its characteristics, and we said that the characteristics are classified into basic ones, those with opposite, and mentioned that the ra has a unique characteristic without an opposite, which is trembling. And then we clarified that Tafkheem and Tarqeeq are actually conditional characteristics of the ra, where depending on the condition or the case, either Tafkheem or Tarqeeq would be the appropriate characteristic to be given for the ra. In 8 cases of Tafkheem, 3 of them are related to fatha, 3 are related to dhamma, and 2 are related to some cases of sukoon. While in some cases, the rule is attenuation, is Tarqeeq, and this incidence happens with 2 cases of kasra and another 2 cases related to sukoon. And there are 2 other cases where both are allowed, either Tafkheem or Tarqeeq, and both of those are related to some situations or conditions of sukoon. In this lesson, we had learned about the cases of Villarization, Tafkheem of the ra, and the cases of attenuation, Tarqeeq of the ra, and learned that the reason for villarizing the ra is fatha or dhamma, and we've learned that the reason for attenuating the ra is kasra, and that there are cases where either villarization, Tafkheem, or attenuation of the ra is allowed. And with that, we reach the end of our lesson on Tafkheem and Tarqeeq of the ra. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that بعونه وقدرته that the Quran Learning Management System, برنامج الجامع لحفظ كتاب الله, would help you, inshallah, to improve your tajweed and improve your tilawah and help you in improving your recitation and help you, if you want, in memorizing the Quran and to help you understand the Quran in the proper way. As we reach the end, we ask Al-Mawla Azza wa Jal أن يتقبل منا هذا العمل. We ask Allah Almighty to accept this work from us, and we ask you to make dua for those who participated in making this work come to life and reach you. Hoping you all the best. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.